Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad, Lisa, and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the ITMOD podcast. Joining us is Lisa Gullickson, wife Dork.
Know any virgins?
And also joining us is Brad Gullickson, mouth Dork.
Mummy came in my house.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. Phoebe. And welcome to the ITMOD podcast, CHATcast.
Darren, your quote was so sad. Why pick that moment?
I love that moment. It's so touching that his
man.
relationship between he and Phoebe. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, this is the CHATcast episode where Mouth Dork got to sit down and interview Andre Gower and Henry McComas about the documentary
Wolfman's Got Nards.
Yes. When is that dropping?
Well, they're still in the process of rolling it out. Billy, the indie dork, and myself caught it at the Chattanooga Film Festival where it had its world premiere. And then they showed it at the Overlook Film Festival like 2 weeks after that. And they're still rolling it out into the festival circuit. But their plan is, to go, like they did in 2007 with the Monster Squad, to hit the road with the documentary and bring it to the Alamo Draft Houses and other theaters as well. We're going to talk about it, but the film is more than just a special feature on a Monster Squad Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And it's a film, and I say this right up front in my conversation, and I cannot hide my enthusiasm in this conversation for the film.
Yeah.
It is a movie that is speaking to the larger idea of passion, art, and cinema. I think even if you don't love the Monster Squad, and if you don't, that's probably because you haven't seen it, because it's an amazing movie.
It is.
And if you think it's not, you need to revisit it,
Or you watched a different movie.
or you watched a different film. But even if you've never seen the film before, you can go into Wolfman's Got Nards, and you will get a complete story. You'll have an emotional response to what Andre Gower as director and Henry McComas as fellow producer, writer on the doc, and the cameraman have done with this film.
How'd this interview come about?
Well, it came about because we struck up a relationship with them at the Chattanooga Film Festival. We talked to them for Film School Rejects, and I had to have them on the show.
Yeah.
It is absolutely surreal to be able to talk to Andre Gower, Sean from the Monster Squad.
Yeah.
I mean, the Monster Squad for me was a tremendously influential film.
Mm-hmm.
If you look around the Dork Cave, you can see multiple posters devoted to the Monster Squad. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. I am one of those maniacs. Sadly, they didn't talk to me about it. I wasn't one of their subjects.
They didn't get to interview you?
No, they didn't get to interview me. That's a real bummer.
That's a tough get,
But-
the interview with Braddy G.
But I got to interview them,
Yeah.
and it's weird and wonderful, this conversation. I had a blast. I should really shut up and stop rambling, and just take it away, past mouth dork.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Andre Gower and Henry McComas.
Okay, and here we are. I am joined by Henry McComas and Andre Gower, the filmmakers behind Wolfman's Got Nards. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us.
And before I confuse our listeners, Henry, could you introduce yourself, and then Andre, yourself, so we get your voices?
Sure thing. I'm Henry McComas, producer and director of photography of Wolfman's Got Nards.
And I'm Andre Gower, director of Wolfman's Got Nards.
All right. Thank you so much. So, the last time we talked at the Chattanooga Film Festival, I had not seen the film yet. It was just before your premiere there.
Right.
And now that I have seen the film, and I've fallen madly in love with it. And,
Wow.
Andre, you were talking about how you wanted to make this movie for the fans because you were so impassioned by their passion. But what I took from the movie was that it's much more universal than just a thank you letter to Monster Squad fans. I mean, I felt like this film really spoke to the creative impulse and the importance of passion and the infectiousness of passion, and how it then pushes out into the world and creates more art.
Certainly, and the original kind of catalyst of making something for the fans, or to celebrate the fans singularly of Monster Squad, kind of it grew and evolved into something deeper of what things inspire or inspire people or impact them, how it impacts them, how it changes their life, how it carries on something from when they're a kid all the way through, adolescence and adulthood. And that's something that we actually learned as we went on this journey making this film. And it kept getting deeper and deeper and stronger and stronger. And you're exactly right. It's, the original step was, to make something to celebrate the fans of this movie. And what it grew into was what affects people and what impacts them and how can it change their life. And we're, in general, and we're telling it through the lens of the Monster Squad and its history and its fans. But it does you can kind of connect to almost anything.
And that's just documentary filmmaking, too. We went into this project with one idea, and from that seed, the movie really started to evolve and became its own thing, and started telling its own narrative, and our jobs were to spot it and make sure it was going in the right direction, but trust that it was going to tell this new story that was inspired by a movie and its dedicated audience.
Well, and Henry, you mentioned in our first conversation how you partnered up with Andre and you wanted to make sure that it wasn't just going to be, that you went and got all the people that the Monster Squad Maniacs would want to see. That you weren't just recording the tour in 2017, but when you're making this film, when did you know that you had something beyond the love affair for Monster Squad?
That's a really good question. And I think what you're speaking on is when we spoke earlier, I'm a fan myself. And it was important that we weren't just making another fan documentary, something that would be a supplemented deleted scene in a Blu-ray or a DVD for a next release. What we wanted was to create a new movie that had a story of its own and could be independent of the source material itself. And when that really became an eye-opener was when we were in Philadelphia and we were at a concert hall called The Underground that plays punk shows. And inside there we had the opportunity to have one of our first celebrity interviews with Chuck Russell and Heather Langenkamp from Dream Warriors. Mm-hmm. And inside that raw, organic environment that was way too hot, the fans were spinning, Paps was everywhere, we got this really unedited interview of Chuck Russell and Heather talking about their influences. And Chuck's influence was Bruce Lee, and Heather's was The Wizard of Oz. So I am in a room with Andre, and Andre's interviewing them, and we're talking to them about the art that inspired them. And then after that, they went on to introduce Dream Warriors to a crowd of fans that were both Monster Squad fans and Freddy Krueger fans. And they were all here because these were the movies that inspired them. And we saw two different generations of cinephiles. And that's when I noticed that not only was this the aesthetic, the kind of fly-on-the-wall aesthetic where we organically look into people's interests and love, but it was also the tone and the themes of what our documentary was going to become.
And, Andre, this has to have been an incredibly surreal experience, going not only around and with the film, but then trying to find a story inside this phenomenon. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the last 10 or 11 years or so of kind of since the resurgence in 2006, it hasn't been haywire in a nonstop schedule, but it's been pretty packed throughout the last 10 years of going to regular events and screenings and learning that this appreciation and love for this movie just will not die, with these fans. And over a couple of years, it became very evident that was something, I think, unique and something special. And that's what kind of sparked, the idea that I think this is kind of very unique, and it's very rare, and you don't see this quite as deep with a lot of other things, or genre movies, or fandom type stuff, or love for your favorite boy band or something. This is different. This is visceral, and this is, it's really kind of tethered. I almost see true Monster Squad fans that really got connected to this movie. It's like another umbilical cord almost, and that they don't want to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And it feeds them, and it feeds it back, and it ended up becoming a full circuit of this energy back and forth. And I just thought it was always interesting. And even when we were just doing a regular appearance or a Q&A or a screening or a convention, way before we were even going to do the documentary, I would explain that and then say this is very interesting, and it's fascinating to be a part of this, and sort of be kind of the focus of it a lot, because I'm really kind of in the lead of being that in between the movie and the fans for the last 10 or 12 years, along with to just as strong but maybe a lesser extent than someone like Ryan Lambert or Ashley Bank or some of the other cast members that appear every once in a while.
Andre is the gatekeeper.
I ended up sort of being the gatekeeper to that energy of, going back and forth, and I kind of took it upon myself to make sure that you kind of make sure you flow it back a little bit over the time and really give a little bit of effort when you have the opportunity. And then we had the chance to make this movie, and, the quality of what came out of that, like you were asking here with this question, is really something, you said surreal, and, maybe surreal is the word later on after I've seen it a million times in front of a bunch of crowds. But right now it's fascinating, and what Henry and the production team actually crafted out of all of our raw footage after weeks and weeks on the road, literally weeks over. We shot this over a year, but it was all compressed and a lot of time together, and conversations and things that I saw, things that Henry saw, and he would absorb it all and take it into his little room and not let anybody else deal with it, and kind of squeeze the marrow out of a week of stuff that we just did, and would come up with something really cool, and started crafting the story that you see today. And it just sort of like I said, we had all of this information and footage and interaction with fans over a year, which we have a ton. And the only way to get
50 terabytes of footage.
We have 50 terabytes of footage, which is a lot, and you have to condense that down sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time you have to condense that down, whether you're writing a novel, whether you're writing a screenplay, whether you're making a movie. But this is a massive amount of experiences and conversations and footage, and instead of condensing that down by distillation or steaming stuff off and boiling it until you just get some residue left, I think what ended up happening is Henry and the crew and myself as part of that, we condensed it and squeezed the marrow out of it, and then that marrow actually started to grow its own kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's kind of deep, and everything is so interconnected while we tell this story, the story within the story. And it's not kind of, what I really like about it is that it's not this trying to be educational and chapter by chapter and, lead you by the nose with some narration and, and then in 1987 and then in 1996.
It's not a definitive documentary.
Yeah, it's more of a story, and Henry really wanted to come to it and approach it more as like a narrative exercise. And I think we did that, which is very hard to do when you're trying to do a doc, to tell the story without being led around by narration or title cards or, copy on the screen, leading you where you're going to go.
It's a fascinating subject, a question to be like, why do people love movies? Why do we love other movies the same way we would love a family member? And when we were a kid or when we were younger and we attached ourselves to something that is not a human living object, but we felt for it as much as if it was one, what did that do to us, and how did it stick with us over generations? And I think at its core, that's what this film is about.
I mean, I certainly agree. I think you guys have certainly achieved, a feast, a narrative, absolutely. You guys just won the Audience Award at the Overlook Film Festival. And congratulations.
Thank you.
And at that Chattanooga screening, I mean, it was bringing people to tears. It brought me to tears. It brought the woman on my right to tears. It brought my buddy Billy to tears. It's just such an emotionally rich experience. And I'm not just saying that from like a place of nostalgia, like when I fell in love with this movie when I was 8 years old. The saga and how the Monster Squad has touched all these lives, including yours. It's really beautiful.
Well, I appreciate it, and that was something that we were looking forward to seeing the first time we see it in a darkened room with other human beings, and I think we were even
desensitized.
Right, because you know what you have, and you've seen it raw, you've seen it sweetened, you've seen it a final thing, but you don't, until you experience it with other people in a dark room that's there, for each other. I think, even Henry and I, that very first screening and the second screening and the third and fourth, you get a different feel of the room. And every time, we've screened it now 4 times at 2 different festivals, and every time there's a little bit, that bass energy is always there. The hits and the beats where, you really know it's going to happen does. But then every time there's been some surprises and some stuff that we maybe weren't expecting, or realized that touched a chord with this person over here, or even after action reviews when people come up and they're drying their face with their sleeves and or laughing their asses off at another point. That was that even adds to the experience for us as filmmakers, and that's sort of the payoff, I think.
It's the only reason to do it is because you're making something for a group of people in one room to share an experience with. And Andre and I had seen that edit so many times. And then when we put it up on our private links, we rewatched it. So here we are at Chattanooga going into our first screening. And I'm not going to speak for Andre, but I forgot sometimes where the emotion was, and I forgot whether or not it was going to play, because I'm not looking at it at fresh eyes anymore. So every screening, whether or not it was Chattanooga, Overlook, or the next one that we're going to do, I sit down and I'm like, here we go. I hope it plays well. Then the room goes dark, and then Fred pops up. People get real still and real quiet, and then we see that movie theater experience. And then we show a glimpse of the fans, and there's a joke. And then everybody laughs, and it's like, we got them. They're hooked in, they're strapped on. Here we go. And then you exhale. And then there's other things, like Fred Decker really is a big emotional part of our movie, as you've seen. And his story is both inspiring and heartbreaking. But in one theater, it's going to get a bunch of people crying, and in the other theater, it's going to get some laughs, because Fred's also a funny guy with the way he's addressing his stuff. So it's interesting to see how different people respond to the film.
Well, I mean, so now that you've screened it 4 times, are you done tinkering with it? Are you not messing with it anymore? Have you put it to bed?
Well, I think for right now it's to bed, but you never know, especially as documentary filmmakers now, that's a new thing for me. You just never, like we on our trip on the road for dealing with this movie production for a year, something always came out that replaced something else that was just better or amazing.
Right.
And who knows? I mean, look, if something comes up, in the next 2 or 3 months that just cannot be avoided, who knows? Maybe, I don't know.
I think the only thing that we're really going to see in a change in the edit is if we have a magical new guest that we would be adding to it.
Mm-hmm.
That would bring something new.
So on that note, I mean, is there anybody that you wish you had gotten but weren't able to make it work?
There's a small handful of big names that are big Monster Squad fans that we would have loved to have included. Schedules and timing. An old friend of mine, someone like Joe Manganiello, who is just a great face and a name and just this giant ball of hunky energy. And but you start talking about Monster Squad and he just becomes a little kid again. And which is awesome with Joe. And I ran into him almost after we were really done and kind of locked. And he was like, I was like, "You want to do an interview?" He's like, "Yeah, I want to do an interview. I played a werewolf for 5 years." I was like, "That doesn't mean you're a big Monster Squad fan." He's like, "Dude, come on." So that would have been something great.
We would have a holy grail.
We do, and then leading up to a holy grail is, I think, is sort of the ultimate Monster Squad fan is Ryan Gosling.
Right.
Because I'm a Ryan Gosling fan.
Sure.
And I think kind of that to have Ryan Gosling, not just because he's some big celebrity A-lister or awesome movie actor, but the kind of he would add another element of what we tried to cover and hopefully comes across in the film is that there's a lot of full circle stories in this thing. To where someone does something and ends up being inspired something, then they get into this, and then it comes back, years later, and they're working together with somebody or something.
Mm-hmm.
The reason Ryan Gosling chose that script, The Nice Guys, is because the guy that co-wrote his favorite movie of all time wrote The Nice Guys and was slated to direct it. And so that means Ryan Gosling is a Monster Squad fan. And he wouldn't have done The Nice Guys that summer if Shane Black hadn't written The Monster Squad.
And The Nice Guys part of Shane Black's return story.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Well,
you always saw is that, this interesting full circle, it starts with sliding doors and serendipity, and then it comes full circle when you really look and connect dots. That is really kind of amazing. So, I mean, that'd be something I'd like to tell, too.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that my favorite takeaways is how the baton is passed from Monster Squad filmmakers to Monster Squad fans to other Monster Squad or to other filmmakers beyond that. But going back to the emotional arc of Fred Decker in this film and how he seems like he's still not sure how he feels about his entire experience around the movie.
I would probably agree with you. I've known Fred for 31 years now, and to see the kind of evolution of him and his career, me and my experiences, his experiences, and in this kind of popular resurgence, for the last 10 or 12 years, Fred's really been sort of a interesting look at it. Because on a random appearance on a day, he'd be super energetic and jovial and laughing, and the next appearance or screening, he would be kind of down or halfway negative about the experience of the movie. And over the years, you saw that conflict in him, and no one can understand that except for him, and he may not even understand that. And that's what Henry and I really tried to just let happen. Let Fred tell his experience and, make it be comfortable, let him tell what he wants to tell. And I think it really comes across without, taking advantage of that, kind of situation or trying to go bubblegummy and celebrate it. I think that's one of the most authentic things. I don't think there's anything cheesy or fake in this movie. But that's certainly one of the most authentic and from the heart things that you could possibly have in this film or almost in any other type of film.
And I just find Fred so inspiring, and especially that arc. Some people say it's bittersweet, and they're not necessarily wrong, but I find that arc in Wolfman's Got Nards entirely inspiring. Last year, we went to a screening of Night of the Creeps at Friday Night Frights, and Fred was there to present it and do Q&As afterwards. And this just goes to show you how he looks at some of his other work. He went in front of a full theater, everybody there who just loves this movie and they're so excited to see it. And he said what I thought was a huge win. He said, "I'm finally just now starting to love this movie," when he was talking about Night of the Creeps. And what I took from that is, oh, people used to think he didn't love it, and now he does. He's coming around and he's having a really good year. What I learned in Wolfman is that you can make something today, you can put it out in the world, and every critic can hop on and pan it and say it's a failure. And what that means to you as an artist and to your work that you create is absolutely nothing, because only time will be able to deem whether or not it's a success. And so I don't look at Fred's story with Monster Squad as a bittersweet one. I look at it as a 30-year success story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. That was my takeaway from it, without a doubt. But, you know, like the interesting thing there is on the other side of the coin with Shane Black, who, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember my initial recollection of his relationship with the Monster Squad is that he initially was not super happy with the filming or the toning down of his R-rated screenplay to the film that it became. Is that correct?
I think, if not exactly, somewhere in the ballpark of, someone like Shane who, creative mind is so, big. And, I love the stories of, kind of the 100 years ago scene when, when the movie opens and it was supposed to be this giant, sea invasion with, 50 ships. It was like the battle of, the Greeks landing on the shores of Troy or something and, attacking this castle with, giant, Braveheart-style clashes in the woods or something. And I think there were supposed to be, Zeppelins in the air and, smart bombs being thrown from Zeppelins onto vampires in the forest or something.
A really cheap movie to make.
Yeah, and I think he blew the entire $11 million budget in the first 8 pages of the script, and that automatically had to come out. But there was a lot. The only thing that I always say I lament about the actual finished product of the Monster Squad is the original drafts of the scripts and even our shooting script. There was so much more backstory and information of how deep and smart these kids were. And their knowledge was so good about what they were talking about, and no one else knew what they were talking about. So, therefore, they were the only ones that could solve this problem. And, when I watch the movie, I always see the setups that we never get payoffs for, and then I always see the payoffs that we didn't know were payoffs because we never got the setup. And those are the things I always wanted to see in that movie. No one knows they're not there except for people that were in it or remember, and I remember a lot of them. And they're not necessarily – most of them have nothing to do with my character, so it's not being, a selfish actor kid. It's just, Fred and Shane put this such a, deep and multi-layered, knowledgeable group of kids in a story, and that's what the cool part of it was. And then they were the only ones that could really figure out how to solve this, problem. Otherwise, the world's going to shit. And, it still came out fine and enjoyable. But I always wish they still had those missing beats or pieces and back stuff. And I think that was a lot of Shane's original, because he went into it. I mean, he went into it and wrote the story and created this whole back world with these kids and everything that were basically him growing up and going to monster movies and reading Pulp Fiction novels and magazines and, famous monsters of Filmland and stuff like that. So we miss a little of that. Actually, we miss a lot of that in actual finished product, but I wish that was there. But, I don't know if he was disappointed with it. I think, I've been somewhere where Shane was explaining his works and his early stuff, and, he says, I think, my favorite thing I've, ever written may be the first drafts of the Monster Squad, which is the first thing I ever tried to write. he had a couple things that he was writing kind of before that, but then, we're making the Monster Squad, and he sells a little movie called Lethal Weapon, and it goes from there. So I think, I think he takes, a lot of, depth and backstory. Because we even look at something like Lethal Weapon. I mean, there's a deep, dark, visceral backstory to Martin Riggs of why he wakes up every day and decides not to eat a bullet.
Right. Yeah.
The only reason he does it is because he likes being a cop and, helping rid the streets of bad guys.
Yeah.
And that kind of has that element almost in every one of his stories, right?
Oh yeah.
And but he always has these deep, rich backstories, and we had that. We had that in Monster Squad. It just our movie's only 81 minutes long and was only $11 million to shoot.
And because of those feelings that Andre got about the deleted scenes in Monster Squad is why when we do release to Blu-ray and DVD, you will have every deleted scene from our 50 terabytes of production for the documentary.
That's right. So you'll have a Blu-ray that it'll take you a week and a half to watch.
Yeah. Well, I'm already dying to get my hands on that copy. What's interesting though is how Shane in your film, he's kind of the opposite of Fred Decker, where he really feels like not only at peace with the film, but he marvels at the success that it has had over these 30 years.
Well, it also didn't affect Shane as much. Shane had a couple lulls, but he always got back on his feet, and because of Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr., his name has always been attached to the papers and in the industry, and for a long time. The interesting thing about Shane and Fred is how well they work together. And it's kind of insane that this September The Predator is going to come out, and it is co-written by Fred Decker and Shane Black, the creative team of the Monster Squad, and The Predator itself is designed by Tom Woodruff Jr., where his career essentially started with the Monster Squad. If that's not a full circle, I don't know what else is.
I mean, there are so many full circles in connected to the Monster Squad, and that you pursue in your documentary. I mean, that's another joy to this film.
Yeah.
And I think that ended up being what evolved into, kind of my favorite elements of this, finished product. And I wish, we had more. Like if we knew that was going to be such a really interesting path, it's something that you would have kind of hunted for, and really dug down for to try to find. But then if you did that, you almost seem like you're manufacturing that. And so, these things kind of organically grew, and then you realize that these were full circles as the pieces fell into place. And I think that keeps sort of that authenticity without trying to, have a manufactured feel.
And, Andre, since, what was it, 2007 when the Alamo called you up for that anniversary screening?
The very first one, it was, April of 2006.
Okay, April 2006. Okay. So,
Easter weekend.
Since then, you've been, like you said, it's like an umbilical cord, right? You've been like living and breathing Monster Squad. And you've now put your heart and soul into this documentary, and you're trying to, translate your experience over these last 10 plus years. Yeah, and you're still in the thick of it with getting the film out there into theaters. But, it's got to be like, how do you let go?
Well, I tell you what's interesting is up until 2006, it was, rarely talked about, or, a few college friends would know it, or, they're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but I liked it. I had it on VHS, or, some people would recognize you here and there, which is great. I was also, super fortunate when I was a kid to do more than the Monster Squad, and I did a bunch of TV shows and stuff where, I was part of that teen magazine scene. And, so you had some celebrity and some notoriety there, which was another thing to kind of, keep your flag waving in the air. But I was off doing, totally different things in the industry for years. I went to college. I worked, in different industries other than the entertainment industry for years. And then, this thing happens in 2006, and it kind of it creates this whole other, it was almost like a wormhole opened in a new dimension, open up in the one you're currently living in, and it's like a parallel universe. And it didn't overtake the original one, but it just kind of ran next to it for 10 years or so. And what's kind of interesting when you think back now that we're done with this endeavor, because we kind of jumped into this and I had this idea and I thought it was going to be this, and this, and Henry and the guys got on board and we just jumped into it, and it all happened really rather fast.
Oh, yeah.
And we did it in a year, which is amazingly fast.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you don't really think about it when that's happening because you're sort of just like tumbling down the mountain at that time, right? And you're not putting your hands out to stop. You're just tucking and rolling. And I thought about it, I think, when I was walking, home one night from one of these amazing late night parties in New Orleans at the Overlook or something, because someone had asked me about, what's my story with the Monster Squad.
Phil Noble from Fangoria.
Yeah, Phil Noble
yeah.
from Fangoria asked me, I love the movie, but there's one thing missing in here to me. It's like, I don't know your story with it. And I knew exactly what he was asking, and Henry knew exactly what I would brace up against when he said that, because it had been a point of, discussion from day one, is this movie, I wasn't making this movie about me. This wasn't Andre Gower's movie about his movie or the movie that he was in. I wanted to tell that other story, and I was really trying to keep myself out of it as much as possible. But what I knew was going to happen eventually at some point, and I think I've realized that after the first couple of screenings with audiences, is, like you asked, how do you let it go? And everybody always asks me, do you get tired of talking about Monster Squad? And I'll get to that. Remind me that you asked me that later, and there's an answer for that too. But it folds into what's happening now. Is I had to finish this movie, and Henry and I had to take it out and show it to people for my story to almost kind of be complete.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of realized that maybe as an epiphany, I don't know, for our $5 word of the day, that I couldn't tell my story during this, even if I wanted to. I didn't want to because it wasn't about my POV. But it's another full circle. And Shane actually kind of mentioned something interesting, talking about a seed 20 years ago, now there's a tree where it is, and he even looks at me, directly while we're interviewing, and he references, me sitting next to the camera that Henry's behind and says, isn't it interesting now that you did a movie about being a kid and you grow up as a monster fighter, now you get to relive that.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was very interesting to me, and I think I heard that again in the screening, and I was walking home, and I realized that, maybe this is putting I don't ever want to put the Monster Squad to bed, because that feels like I'm putting a wet blanket on the energy and the love that the fans have, and I don't want that to happen for them. But for me, it seems like it's maybe just another path on this interesting journey that's tied with Monster Squad, and maybe this documentary happens to be my Tom Woodruff moment or my Mike Hill moment, to where, the last 10 years has been interesting. That built up this experience. But now I'm back, I moved back to LA a couple years ago. I have a production company. I've developed a couple projects. I've got TV shows in development at different studios. I have one on Nerdist channel. We talk about short films, and then I go and make this documentary. And that wouldn't have happened without that experience. So this is my own sliding door serendipity kind of full circle story. And I'm fortunate enough I get to tell that, to you and to the media and to podcasts and to like Q&As. And so I find that kind of interesting. So I'm kind of looking at that right now. And this is the first time I've kind of expressed that, I think. I don't know if it made sense or not.
Here's the perspective of somebody who just spent a year with Andre Gower.
Let's hear it.
How do you let go of the Monster Squad? You don't.
Mm-hmm.
How many people can say that they know somebody who's been in the industry for over 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
Not many. The things that I've learned from Andre over the year and that I have had the pleasure of witnessing is kind of remarkable. He launched 2, maybe 3 seasons of a show. How many seasons were in 1 year? Was it 2?
Of what?
Of Shorted.
We did 2.
2 seasons in 1 year and a feature-length documentary, all while touring and making sure the relationship of a dedicated fandom is never neglected.
Right.
And that takes an unbelievable amount of time. So Andre lives for this. It ignites him. He's very passionate about it, and it's not all just for Monster Squad, because what it does is it also gets his foot in the door and opens other conversations for future creative endeavors, whether that be a TV series, a movie, a book, whatever it is, it's the next step. So when we're talking about how art inspires art and how Monster Squad inspires other creatives, 30 years ago, Andre was the star of a movie, and now he's behind the camera. 30 years ago, I was a fan of a movie, and now I get to make a movie with the Monster Squad. And that's pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah, and, so that question of, do you ever get tired of the Monster Squad? I could ask myself that question. And the reality is that movie maniacs like ourselves, my dad will ask, why do you watch Indiana Jones over and over again? Or, what's the big deal about Star Wars or Lawrence of Arabia? Why do you keep watching these movies over and over again? Because they become a part of you, right? So even as a fan, they take a hold of your being, your soul. And so, no, of course I never get tired of Monster Squad.
Yeah, and, when people ask me that, it's, I don't mind talking about, a lot of people don't like to talk about stuff they did a long time ago or what they're known for. They're like, I do other things too, I paint and I landscape design and, but yeah, I can knit too, but, you're saying that in a context when you're sitting at a table, maybe a convention or on stage at a Q&A for the screening, you're only there because of that. And you have to understand how, rare that is. But I think the day that I get tired of talking about Monster Squad is the day the fans don't want to talk about it anymore. That's when I'll stop. Because that's what really kind of feeds that. And to see people 30 years later or 20 years later, or now their kids come up and just get all excited and to have teenagers or 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds come and get all, teary-eyed or excited and jumping around that they get to meet you, which you don't look anything like you did in the thing that they're referencing, but they want to sit there and talk to you as much as they possibly can. Yeah. You also have, who wouldn't feed off of that? Who wouldn't at least... You have to kind of understand and respect that and appreciate that there's very few people on the planet that get to be in that situation.
Here's something you don't see in the documentary. We shoot for 12 to 18 hours in a day. We put the camera away. We tear down. And then we look over, and Andre is still talking to fans, still taking photos, still humoring and entertaining them, and that goes on for about 3 more hours.
Sure, yeah. I was at one of those screenings. I was at that Alamo Drafthouse Winchester screening you guys did, and it's impressive. I mean, you guys gave a lot of time to these people that love who you represent, and that's beautiful. And I count myself among those lucky fans. It's wild to me that I get to talk to you over the phone to do this podcast. I mean, it's just something I never would have expected myself.
Well, that's good. We're glad you're in the club. Your business card's in the mail. You mentioned being at the Alamo Winchester, which was the 17th venue in 17 days that we did, and we had, I don't know, there was probably 130 people at Winchester, 125, something like that.
Yeah, easy.
And usually on those things, I think the average was probably 85, 95% of the people that watched the movie stayed outside to get their poster signed or, get a picture taken with their signed poster or stuff they brought. And what I always, it's really tough to have a line of 100 people waiting in the lobby just to get to you, which just seems ridiculous. But you have to appreciate the fact that someone's going to do that. And the only thing that I always kind of regret is I can, you can only give everybody about 90 seconds or, 2 or 3 minutes. And, you wish you could take an hour with everybody, but then that'd be 125 hours. Sure. And, but you've got to give them at least something. And, you feed off that as something, it's kind of like a fuel, but, they only, that's their one experience. possibly with one of the most important things to them. So you've got to appreciate that quite a bit and respect it just a little bit. And I don't mind those 90 seconds or those 3 minutes whatsoever.
And it's important to mention that we're talking about what these guys do for the fans, but the reason why we made this movie is because of what the fans did for the movie and for us as well, because we wouldn't have had this is the little movie that couldn't until it could, and we wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for the people that showed up in the theater, not many of them, the people that showed up at HBO and started making the bootlegs, the people that bought the VHS, the people that got the DVD, the people that showed up in 2006. Like, these are people that they're dedicated and finding these events and finding these screenings because of something they love, and that's the reason why the movie is a success. We couldn't have done it without them.
I mean, that's sort of that, double-sided umbilical tether that these fans, especially, we're talking about Monster Squad fans, that connection nourishes them, and in turn it nourishes us, as the cast. And then, we got to make this, really fun documentary that was, a crazy whirlwind tumbling down a hill for a year. And now we get to put it out there. And now, this finished product is now nourishing more people. So it's like, I think we've just added on to this tether, maybe, hopefully. I don't know.
Before Scream Factory and Arrow, how many distributors can say that their DVD was because of fan demand?
Right. Not many.
I hadn't heard of one until 2007.
Yeah.
Well, and so now with Wolfman's Got Nards, it's time to hit the road again, right? You're doing it, but you got to come back to the Alamo Winchester.
Yeah, damn it, we just got off the road. So, so you mentioned that, the Alamo tour. That's something that's, sort of in discussions now. When we could do that, because when we were on that original tour, Winchester was the last day of 17 days in 17 cities. When you start in San Francisco and 17 days later you're in Winchester, Virginia, and you haven't missed a day. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this one because I don't have to bring a goddamn camera.
That's right. You're not going to work around here on this one. But I think hopefully what we'll do is, if enough of those Alamo stores would want us to come back, and Henry and I will, travel and talk to the fans, because what I thought was interesting, again, another full circle, is none of this would have happened without the Alamo and Eric Vespi and Aaron Morgan and those, guys putting this event together in 2006. Then we get to go on an Alamo tour on our 30th anniversary where we announced the documentary. And they're the first public that knew that something like this was in the works. So they got the information way before anybody else, and that's kind of special. And, hopefully, I think, if 50% of those people that went to those, tour screenings last August would come to a screening of the documentary, I would do that in a heartbeat. I would love it. If 5 of them and each one came back, I would take it.
Oh, that's easy.
And I'd love to go, and I think there'd be more, and we're talking about it right now. We just got to figure out a schedule, because our festival schedules, may start blowing up here.
Our dance card is getting full.
Our dance card's getting full.
My favorite part about Wolfman is that this is a movie theater film. This is a film that should be seen in movie theaters.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to make a point to go to as many as we can.
Yeah, because as much as I'm looking forward to that Blu-ray, there's nothing like sitting in a crowd of Monster Squad fans and watching this documentary like I got to experience in Chattanooga. It's wild.
I think that's, like Henry said, which was, I think he kind of had it in his pocket the whole time when he was putting this together, of, I want to make a movie that makes people be in the theater again and remember what that was like. Mm-hmm. And I think we do that in like the first 24 seconds of this movie, and you're like, remember what that was. Yeah. And then, we keep hitting it every couple minutes and reminding you of what that feeling was, whether it's the sound of the projector or, some of the score and music that we use that's just kind of like a droning score to Indiana Jones or whatever movie, strikes your chord. And, you remember it, and it replaces that, it really pushes the button on that memory, and you feel it in your gut.
Yeah. I think like I said, the film works on many levels, and in a lot of ways it's a validation for my own obsessions and for fandom as a whole.
Well, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Mine too.
Well, congratulations, guys. Thanks again for taking the time out of your night to chat with me. And I can't wait to watch the movie again. I can't wait to get that Blu-ray. I can't wait to see you guys back at the Alamo Winchester. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you. And let Alamo Winchester and any other, theater in your podcast voice or written word, if someone wants it, let us know. We'll schedule it, because like I said, this is or like Henry said, rather, this is that movie that you enjoy with your friends. And if you're Monster Squad fans, you're my friend and you're Henry's friend, and we'd love to sit in your living room of theater and watch it with you.
And we just want to thank you too, because it's people like Film School Rejects and In the Mouth of Dorkness and everybody that keeps projects like this alive. So we really appreciate you coming out to Chattanooga and having us on. It means the world to us.
Well, thank you so much. And, Andy Garrison, the programmer at Winchester, he's down already.
Oh, I know. I love Andy. Andy and I are, we're staying in touch, and we'll be talking soon.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, guys. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you later.
All right, we'll see you out there on the road.
See ya.
Take care.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. How cool was that?
Oh my God, you're best friends now.
Is Lisa mocking me?
What?
We are best friends now,
Yes.
or at least close acquaintances.
Yes.
I loved that conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it half as much as I did. Think about it. Fred Dekker, Shane Black, they got together on this movie way back in 1986. I want to look that up. Lisa, look that up for me.
What am I looking up? I wasn't listening.
Lisa's like, I'm not part of this conversation. I don't care. 1987. 1987. They got together. They made this movie. It was a box office failure. And then over time, it built a massive following. A bunch of crazy talented people were spawned not only out of this film, but also from the fandom of this film. Mm-hmm. And Fred Dekker and Shane Black are together again, making The Predator, which we're going to see this September, with the same monster makeup crew that put together, the Gillman and, and the Wolfman and all that stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it in this conversation, but Mike Hall, the guy who made the Shape of Water Gillman, he got his career out of doing reproductions of the Monster Squad creatures for a theater in England. He would make up his buddies, and they would attend the opening nights of the Monster Squad in England at the time, and then he would take his artistry that he learned making those creatures to his Academy Award winning, creation in The Shape of Water.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Huh.
So I don't know. This was a tremendous treat for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
I hope,
they did.
I hope when they when it does the rounds that they, especially at the Alamo, that they do a double feature with the Monster Squad, the actual film, and then the documentary.
That'd be so fun.
That's
and then Andre Gower could come in, and then he can become our best friends.
Well, as you heard at the end of the interview, they want to come back to Winchester. They're buddies with Andy.
Yes.
Well, we happen to be the official podcast of the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester. We can definitely make that happen.
Yeah.
Andy can make it happen.
Yes, Andy can make it happen. All right. So thanks for that, B.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Andre and Henry. And when you see Wolfman's Got Nards come to your town, please seek it out. I think you will be pleasantly surprised, or if not surprised, certainly satisfied by the film. And until then, watch the Monster Squad again.
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, that's going to do it for us. You can follow the podcast at ITMODcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow the Turtle Dork at Brian William Young. On Facebook, at the Turtle Dork on Instagram. I'm sorry, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, at the Turtle Dork on Twitter. And Wife Dork is Bake Dork, at Bake Dork on Twitter, at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, and also Letterboxd and
Instagram.
Brad Gullickson is at MouthDork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterbook.
Letterbook and Facebox.
Yeah, Facebook and Letterbox, and also Untapped. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. I'm just going to say it on all social medias.
And if you are interested in following Wolfman's Got Nards, follow them at The Squad Doc.
On Twitter?
On Twitter and Instagram.
All right. That's going to do it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you all for listening. And until next time.
For a last chance of some pie.